Hello and welcome. This podcast is brought to you by Industrial Info Resources. Since 1983, we have been providing global market intelligence on the industrial and the energy markets. And through the combination of our trusted data, which is validated and qualified direct from source, and our analytics and forecasting tools and solutions, we help our customers stay connected and in tune with the latest project and investment opportunities and those trends occurring across the world. My name is Shaheen Chohan, and I'm the Vice President of Global Analytics at Industrial Info Resources. I'm based in our Dubai office and have been with the company now for almost 15 years. I'm delighted to be joined today by two fellow members of our market analytics team. Firstly, I'd like to introduce Mike Bergen, Executive Vice President, and also here today is Chris Smith, our VP of Labour Analytics. Welcome, gentlemen. Before we dive into the discussion and the insights, I would like to say a very big thank you to Kodiak, today's podcast sponsor. Kodiak serves large-scale commercial and industrial contractors, providing them with tenured professionals ranging from engineers, project managers, modelers to electricians, pipe welders and pipe fitters, experienced in both projects such as mission-critical, refineries, hospitals, semiconductor plants, and others. Now, Chris, before we kind of get into the meat of the discussion, so to speak, I'd like and dive into those trends. What I'd like you to do is perhaps just explain a little bit about the products and services that sit within the labour analytics service that you offer our clients and customers.
Industrial Info are tracking projects across the globe, following the spending for capital, maintenance, turnarounds, projects like that. And we're able to understand through our modeling process the demand that comes along with that, right? So you need people to do those jobs. Well, Industrial Info is tracking that activity across the globe, and we're able to identify what crafts are needed, when they're needed, how many are needed, and then we further go in and do some more research, identifying the supply, finding out where the people are located, how many people are needed in those areas, and then we formulate that to help identify, is there any labor constraints? Are there deficits of people? Is that causing labor pressure in the area? And with that, we provide that information to our clients so they can better plan their projects, identify where they're going to have challenges or have opportunities to find people. Then we further go in and call in to contractors and EPC firms in that area and find out what the wages are, right? So we want to understand what's being paid, is there per diem needed, things of that nature, right? By doing all of this, we're able to, identify if there's going to be any wage escalation due to labor pressures, or are they going to be able to fill the project needs with the local craftsmen. We then put that into various methods of delivery, one being our labor analytics platform, where we're able to look at labor overview for different areas, being able to compare wages in different areas, look at the supply in this area, will this be enough, look at risk analysis, be able to say, hey, if I'm going to see problems in this area, will I need to increase wages? How will I be able to, get people to the job site? We have a tool in there that looks at the supply. Where's the supply? It's our supply search is what it's called. It's like, where is the supply located? If I'm in let's say, the Gulf Coast region of Texas, can I pull people from the West Coast? Can I pull them from up northeast? Things of that nature, right? And then we have several other tools, more on the pricing aspect of it, and one of them is called the cost estimator. We can look at an area, we know what the wages are in that area, we know what the supply is in that area. What is that project going to cost me based on the number of people that I'm going to need, the duration of the project? And so that's a really good tool that will help the planner see on a budgeting aspect, what our costs are going to be.
Yeah, so this is basically blending in your primary research in the field and then blending it with our underlying data and our forecasting, which actually, Mike, I know that you very much have a big hand in the industrial spending forecast that we produce every quarter. And just to explain a little bit about that, our forecast model is based, again, on a bottom-up methodology using all of those projects and plants that our researchers are tracking on a daily basis, but also the top-down modeling aspect of that. So you're using, macroeconomic indicators, GDP, CPI index, et cetera, We are going to be talking a lot more about, and obviously uncovering the getting to the true picture of, is the market ultimately balanced, short, or is it oversupplied from a labour perspective? But my big question to you, Mike, because I know you take a big kind of macro view, is conditions aren't exactly ideal. There's a lot of uncertainty baked into the market at the moment. And so that will clearly be causing a little bit of concern, not only for project owners, but the investors of those projects. Do you think the current outlook is going to impact, maybe soften, some of the capital spending that was previously sitting in the pipeline, I guess at the start of the year?
When we go back to what we experienced back before COVID, we had a pretty big industrial process expansion that took place. And that took a lot of pipe fitters, welders, electricians to actually build out these complexes. Since COVID, we had introduced the IRA, the Infrastructure Bill, and the CHIPS Act. And that was a dynamic shift from the Gulf Coast out into other parts of the country to see construction build out for these mega projects. And that was around decarbonization, electric vehicle manufacturing, batteries, so on and so forth. And that wave took us into a new era of not only inflation that's been built into this spending forecast scenario, but also just more demand for labor across the country. So today we entered into a new administration with Trump 2.0. The outlook looked very promising in the beginning. We knew he was campaigning on tariffs and being able to implement that and to correct the playing field, if you will, so new trading policies in place. And that has taken quite a bit of a shock to the economy right now and the expectation of where things are going to go. So we have this built-up uncertainty that's happening right now in the economic picture. But we also have this other dynamic that's happening with announcements of new manufacturing to come back into the States. And so while we have this layer of the incentives that have been put in place by the previous administration, we now have this other incentive that's coming into place on amping up reshoring here into the States. And so I believe ultimately we're just building on the stress that's in the labor market right now by introducing some of these really large projects that are being announced right now.
So just stepping back from what you've just said, would you say, Chris, are the labor markets, are they balanced? Are they oversupplied, or are we really tight at the moment? Because, Mike, as you said, if we do see this wave of reshoring and incentivized foreign direct investment into the UK, into the US, and new facilities, new factories being built by foreign companies, will the labour markets be able to accommodate that?
Well, no, not at all, because we have a huge shortage as it is right now. As Mike was just saying, this reshoring and onshoring of these projects is just adding to the demand that's already out there, right? And so you're going to have these investments that are going into that, including what we're already seeing with semiconductors and data centers, is compounding the problem with the demand, which our supply has not been where it needed to be in many years, right? And biggest things that we're seeing is that the retirement of those folks that are leaving the jobs out there, the young folks aren't coming in to refill that, right?
And I suppose, did we see a spike, a kind of a shift in the supply-demand balance, or certainly the supply side of the market during COVID? Did we see a lot of people exit the market and they just didn't come back post-COVID?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's what happened. Whenever all the subsidies were happening out there and the government was just giving money away left and right, there was a lot of folks that said, hey, if I can live off of this, I can maybe stop working out in the heat, stop working out in the weather, not working hard. I can live off these subsidies until they run out. And by that time, they've already changed their lifestyle and they can work for less money doing other things, or they're migrating to other type of either industries or jobs, working in healthcare or things of that nature, right? And so that further compounded. And so we haven't recovered from that. nor have we recovered from the fact that, I've had a history of working out in the plants, and during my time working in the plants, I never had a helper to train and pass on my knowledge to. Right. And that was because plant owners and contractors only wanted journeyman level craftsmen to do the job, and so they created this vacuum to where they have not been able to fill, and then families wanting their kids to go to college, let's get a 4-year degree. That has created that gap that we have in the supply, as well as training programs that they have out there. They're really not scaling fast enough to put these folks out into. So you do have training programs out there, but there's just not enough people going through that to fill that gap. So we've got a challenge far into the future.
Mike, I'd like to come back to one statement you made about in prior years, all of that major CapEx was concentrated, I think you said, on the Gulf Coast, right?
Yes.
Now you're saying that some of these really quite big mega projects across the US, so it's no longer a concentrated demand profile, it's kind of pretty much across east to west, north to south of the US. Is that kind of creating a new set of challenges when it comes to procuring and sourcing labor?
Yeah, absolutely, because you had a concentration of labor that was sitting down here in the Gulf Coast region, and what a lot that we identify in our supply and demand dynamics is the travelers that are making up the shortfall that are out there. And in the years that I've been doing this, I haven't seen something build up so rapidly and at such a high level is the build out of data centers. So that AI infrastructure that's being proposed, building out, we witnessed, $50 billion being executed last year. We're expecting probably about a $78 billion data center build out this year, and we do see that continuing on through, which is, this uncertainty that's in the market right now. But that is scattered across the country, so that has made home to where it, really originated from, which is up in Virginia, Texas, Arizona, just all over the South. Now we're starting to see data centers pop up. So they're trying to find homes in areas in which they can embrace power, because power is a big component of that, but also just the land, the support for the data center, and they're looking everywhere.
No disrespect to anybody who constructs data centers. If you look at the physical aspect of the infrastructure, to the untrained eye, they seem fairly simple builds, right? Compared to, let's say, a mega ethylene plant, which is, when
sure.
A few years back we saw very highly complex pieces of infrastructure with clearly required a very wide palette of craft labor types, right? Are you, Chris, are you seeing some specific pinch points, real supply issues when it comes to specific crafts?
They require a lot of electricians for those. And so, as Mike was saying about drawing travelers out, some of those travelers that are going to these other projects, you got to remember, you're taking that person away from that local area that they live in, and now you're creating a deficit there, right? And so, as you were saying, there's a lot of work in the Gulf Coast. Now these areas where these data centers are, a lot of those folks have moved to the Gulf Coast to work. Now, some of them are going back. But when they're doing that, you are taking those electricians, carpenters, scaffold builders, some of your soft trades that are going up there to, their tilt wall buildings on a lot of that. So you use a lot of those trades. So your civil crafts, they're drawing those away from the Gulf Coast now and from other areas because they're really paying good wages to do that, right? They've got to draw them there. And they kind of almost got an open checkbook on that to say, we're going to pay what we need to, because they really highly invested a lot of money in building those data centers. And so they are really sucking those, trades off of other areas.
Yeah, and that's an important point to make, is that the mechanical trades are still very big in this, because you have a lot of infrastructure that's needed for mechanical, which relates to all the power generation backup units that they have to put in, but also the cooling systems that are there, HVAC and so forth. And so that complex, while it looks commercial, has a lot of industrial features to it. On top of that, you do have big money that's being thrown out there with Meta, Google, and so on and so forth, Amazon, and they're willing to pay longer per diems, higher wages, and we know that folks in the construction industry tradesmen like to move where the money is, right? And so they can be attracted by just simply $1 more an hour.
So what has the, this supply-demand imbalance, how has that affected wages?
Definitely causes them to increase, right? So when you're competing with those type of wages, you're again trying to draw to your refining, to your petrochemical, and you're just like LNG. LNG pays really well, right? And so we were talking to a client yesterday. They're like, we're really struggling. We can't pay per diem 7 days. We can't pay $3 more an hour because these data centers are drawing from us and the LNG projects are drawing from us. And so all that does, on top of the shortage, on top of the lack of skill, which all causes the wages go up, because these skilled craftsmen can demand what they want. They're basically writing their own check. It just drives wages up. And so companies are trying to control that by using per diem on 7 days, as Mike was talking about, but bonuses, job completion, safety incentives, things of that nature,
Right.
Which are all cost.
Yeah. Going back to, I guess it's the wage inflation is the byproduct of the supply-demand imbalance. But the question I do have is, project owners are willing to spend, so they're going to have to spend to attract the right talent. So it's a very competitive market. Do we actually see projects slip, get postponed? Do the schedules have to get adjusted simply off the back of lack of supply of the right labor?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and some of those direct impacts, just like you're saying, are delays. Other thing is the productivity, right? How is the productivity? You've got less skilled guys going in there. You're hiring a bunch of people, but in all those people, you may have one good skilled person that has to deal with 4 or 5 other unskilled or lesser skilled person, which takes his time away from doing being the productivity and maybe doing rework, things of that nature. Safety issues we've seen in the news here recently of a project due to the lack of skill with something. There was a pretty serious incident.
The data, the analysis, and the insights that you provide, this is, useful content for, I guess, EPCs as well as project owners? Are they pretty much the two target end users?
Oh yeah, absolutely, and construction firms.
And do they use it in a slightly different way?
They do.
Okay.
They do. There's different ways to employ this information that we get, right? A lot of times plant owners are using it to look at their projects and planning their projects. When are we seeing the peaks of demand? Do I need to move my project out? Do I need to move it forward? The other way that they're using our information is to look at the wages. And when they're looking at their contracts, are we getting charged too much? Or are we coming in with a bid that's too high? Or is the bid not enough? If the bid's not enough and they're not paying their people enough, they're not going to be able to staff it. And then on these longer term projects, it's what are we forecasting? So we're forecasting these wages out 5 years, right? You can take a look at our forecast and say, okay, if I'm paying X dollar now, 3 years from now, when we're at peak with our project, are we going to be in the right place with what we're paying now? Do we build in wage increases? What do we need to do to maintain and retain these folks, right?
Right.
And then on the other side, with the contractors, it is going in there and saying, hey, guy, we've got to pay this much. There's a deficit. This is why we're at where we are. And, that makes for a good conversation between the two, the two folks that are talking, the owners and along with the contractors.
Right. And most importantly in that is that we're a third-party resource, right? We're another data point for them to look at, because we survey a lot of contractors to gather wages every quarter, and we can present that to the owner and the contractor, and they can see this independent wage survey and say, look, this is what the market's saying. It's not what the contractor's dictating or the owner wants to pay. It's what the market's dictating. And so that creates a better atmosphere for them to, develop a strategy moving forward with retaining people on the job site and getting the project done on time.
I know we're heavily entrenched and we go very deep into the US and the Canadian market, right? Our service covers Canada as well, labour supply, wages in Canada. Any other geographies? Do we serve clients elsewhere?
Yeah, so we can provide information, labour demand information on a global scale.
Well, gentlemen, sorry, Mike, did Do you want to?
Yeah, I think it's important to come back to the question about where we stand right now, because while we're talking about the constraints in the labor market and thinking about if the economy is actually going to relieve some of that, what we've heard, from Chris is that, there has been a shortfall, and we haven't been very good at actually trying to build back up that inventory of workers and getting, enough people on the ground doing it. We have another real question out there is what do tariffs do to the modular build aspects of construction that has helped to get the labor market really situated to be able to complete a project on time. If those modules are coming overseas, then those could be subject to tariffs, which could raise the cost of the project.
Right.
Right. And so when we look at where we're at today, we started off the year with a record number of projects in the pipeline. And we anticipated that because when we go back to last two presidential elections, we saw the uncertainty build up in that election year. Projects were stalled. They got pushed into the next year. We went to a record $900+ billion worth of projects start construction in the U.S. this year, which is a record amount.
So that was there was a little bit of stalling because of uncertainty around this was pre-election.
Yes. Yeah.
So some of that spending got pushed into this year. We kind of got a little bit of a sugar rush from the new administration, but now we've got this next wave of uncertainty, which you're saying is slowing things down again.
Yeah, and so when you look at IR's Project Spending Index, and it basically is measuring the pipeline of projects that are out there,
right?
We're up through the first quarter 16% over last year,
okay,
right? Which is showing the health of the industry, the sentiment of owners out there and their project activity. If you look at the construction starts data, right, actual projects that made it through FID that are in the field in construction the first quarter, we're down like 30%. And so that is the ramifications of tariff discussion even before we got to April 2nd, right? And so when you mix those two together and try to read what's going on in this picture, you have owners that are sitting there waiting for the tariff, let's say, policies to be settled to see which direction they're going to take their projects, but no decisions have been made to really cancel projects or put them on hold in a impactful way that we would say there's a slowdown in this industrial economy.
Right.
Right.
So, which is good news, because ultimately, what that is demonstrating is the demand for that physical project. The rationale for that project has not dissipated at all. It's really just about timing now. And this may be a 90-day duration where we just may see people sort of sit, as you said, sit on their hands for the next 90 days until we start to see some of these bilateral agreements between the US and some of these trade partners start to come through. Interesting.
Yeah, it is definitely a cost scenario, because if you're bringing equipment over from overseas, you're going to be paying higher tariffs. Now, it could be different 3 months from now. Right. And so I think that is one of the reasons why we are seeing projects just get pushed out, a little bit in time, but not, to the next year. Right. So right now we've got still $845 billion sitting in the pipeline for this year to start construction. Now, when we look at the picture of, what is driving spending this year from a bigger, mega project perspective, data centers is like the core of this thing. And then off that you have, some beneficiaries, power being one of them. Obviously, we talked about natural gas power generation. We got transmission distribution, but even the semiconductor market. While there's been talk about the IRA repealing that, the CHIPS Act repealing that, there's now favorable discussion about how do we restructure the CHIPS Act and bring
the CHIPS Act still in situ, right?
Everything's still in place.
Got it.
Yeah, that battle has not gone on yet.
Right.
And it may not, because we're entering into midterms, and I don't think we're going to pass any repeal in Congress to before the mid-year. But in all, there are industries that sit outside this data center market that are in position to continue on growth, right? Regardless of what happens in the macroeconomic picture. So macroeconomic picture, industrial economic picture. This is looking pretty sound with some hiccups this first quarter, but I think that we're moving into another era of another bubble being built out with reshoring. Right now, we've captured 2 $258 billion worth of projects out of the $2 trillion that's been announced for investments back here in the States, and that's across pharmaceutical, semiconductors, data centers, power generation, mining, projects.
Right.
And so those are reality. You had GE Aerospace say that they're subject to like $800 million worth of tariffs on their manufacturing side outside of the States. So they announced $1 billion investment here in the States to manufacture. So we're expected to see more of that come about.
Right. Chris, so in closure, it looks like a big pipeline. A wave is coming, right? So
Wave's coming.
You're expecting, in terms of that supply-demand imbalance, it doesn't seem like it's going to get fixed anytime soon. It's going to be a tight market. Would that be fair to say?
Absolutely. As I said earlier, we're not out of the water.
Right.
It's getting deeper.
Okay. Well, gentlemen, I think that brings us to the conclusion of the podcast. Big thanks to both of you for sharing your insights and your perspectives. Really valuable stuff. For those who've tuned in today, if any of you have got any specific questions about any of the topics that you heard from, Mike or Chris, then please do reach out directly to us. And of course, a very big thank you to Kodiak, our sponsor today. Please do take some time to take a look at their website and, see what these guys do and do reach out to them. And finally, thank you for joining us. I hope we have helped you better navigate some of the currents of change that we're seeing currently. Thank you, everybody.